Hello, everyone. My name is Kid Lee, and welcome to the first episode of my new discussion series. This was actually a series that I mentioned that was going to start a few weeks ago, and the idea behind this series is whenever there's a hot topic, either in SWTOR or in the gaming industry, I grab some people and we go ahead and sit down and talk about it. Here in this episode, we are going to talk about the article that was written by Kotaku entitled Bioware Doubles Down on Anthem as Pressure Mounts. For this episode, I've brought in JT from the Passionately Casual podcast and Alise from the SWTOR Council. How you guys doing?
Awesome.
I'm doing good.
As we kick this off, I'm going to read 3 quotes from the article so everybody has an idea of exactly what this article is talking about. It kicks off by saying, over the past few months, BioWare has essentially transformed into a single game studio as it harnesses its teams to work on the new multiplayer action game Anthem. Sources say there are still small teams maintaining Star Wars The Old Republic and piecing together the next Dragon Age, which has recently been rebooted, but the bulk of BioWare staff, both in Edmonton and Austin, are now on Anthem. BioWare has also discussed ending development of Star Wars The Old Republic. Sources said, although one person familiar with the studio told me recently that plans are still up in the air on this. What is clear is that both BioWare studios are now focused on Anthem and will be until the game comes out. The executive producer and shepherd of the Dragon Age franchise was also recently moved to Anthem as well. So I'd love to get your guys' opinions sort of on this whole deal. Again, the initial article came out on Kotaku, but has since been released on multiple websites. Some websites like Forbes, they've written like 3 or 4 articles at this point. But if we want to go ahead and start with JT, what was sort of your initial thoughts on this?
The sky is falling. Sky is falling. No, I honestly though, it is kind of reminiscent of how BioWare handles and has handled a lot of their gaming throughout their history. If they have a big title, they usually have gone in and rated the gaming development teams and brought those people, the talented people in to help finish up, develop other aspects of games. And I think that this would be true for Anthem, especially in light of what has happened over this past year with some of the things, the bugs and stuff to Mass Effect Andromeda, and kind of how people were left looking for the Mass Effect that they were wanting. Mm-hmm. And also we're Battlefront 2 with the bad taste of the loot crates and stuff like that. And also some people kind of feeling a little lackluster by some of the things done in Battlefront 2.
Yeah, and there were even rumors last year that there were members of the SWTOR team working on not Anthem, but Andromeda as well.
Right.
So how about you, Alise? What were your initial thoughts on these articles when they came out?
Kind of like JT that the sky was falling, but a little bit more confirmation of what I've been seeing over the last year and a half, at the very least. Just looking at kind of peripheral stuff. Lots of job postings have been going up. I've been sharing them kind of amongst people that I know, and like for BioWare Austin, and they were all Anthem, 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 Anthem. Then on Twitter, lots of writers for SWTOR saying, hey, now I can talk about it after Anthem was announced at E3, right?
Right.
Oh, now we can talk about it. We've been writing on Anthem, which before they weren't saying anything about it. A whole bunch of people who wrote on Coffee and Kotet, not the least of which is Drew Caprichin, who is now lead writer on Anthem. Kind of all that stuff, but I've been sitting back waiting. And then after the Mass Effect Andromeda and the closure of BioWare Montreal was a huge gut check for me. Jason Schreier, who actually broke that was coming, scooped that in May, and the studio was closed in August after the game being released in March. Him doing this again now, saying that they thought about ending development on SWTOR and that it's still up in the air, just kind of was like, okay, this makes sense now.
So one thing I want to talk about real quick with that particular statement, the discussion about potentially ending SWTOR, do we think that would have happened before or after the server mergers?
Before.
Yeah, I think before.
I don't think we would have had, well, and also you have to say too, with them merging, moving to the new servers and taking SWTOR with it. I don't honestly think that was done for SWTOR. I think it was done for Anthem, and because it's Bioware Austin is doing all the back end stuff for both games, that's why we got to go.
Right.
Yeah, and again, I would probably add on to that. I don't think if that they would have spent all the money on the new server tech and stuff that they've been using for the server mergers if they were not going to continue any development. Now, how much development? I guess that would definitely still be up in the air.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, my only thought on that is sometimes these gaming companies can make really quick decisions, or at least it appears to be quick decisions, perhaps from our side. So I didn't know if it was one of those cases where they went ahead and they did the server mergers and they did everything they did towards the end of the year, and perhaps it's only been within the last couple of weeks that all this information had been discussed, at least on the Bioware and EA side.
Well, I just know that when I went to the Bad Feeling meetup, not this past PAX, but the one before that, so the actual last one that Chuck and Brian actually had, I asked Eric Musco directly if server mergers were a possibility, and they said absolutely. They just had to figure out how to do it. Now, that was 2 PAX ago. Mm-hmm. So that was already being discussed. They were just working out the technical details. So I when I say I think that end it or not end it happened before that of actually merging, I think they still thought about it, but there's a continuum there, right? I mean, you brainstorm a lot of things. It doesn't necessarily mean everything you brainstorm about ends up coming to fruition. So, where exactly the decision was made in relation to all this stuff with Anthem and back-end improvements and, okay, this is what we're going to do in 2016. This is what we're going to do in 2017. I'm not sure. But I think Anthem maybe sped up that timeline perhaps a little bit faster would be how I'd say it.
Yep. So if we just sort of talk about Anthem a little bit more, at this point of where we're at with Anthem, and then again you look at the broader gaming market and you see what's currently happening with Destiny and some of the other games that are like it. I mean, how do you think Anthem's going to turn out? Or do you think it's just way too early to tell at this point?
I think it's a little early, but I also kind of maybe they're taking their some notes on how Destiny came across, Destiny 2, in fact, came across and some other thing like that, because they actually officially delayed it now until 2019. So I think that is actually, in my opinion, I think that's a good thing that they actually are delaying it, because I think I think EA and BioWare know they have to get this one right. That they are on with, like I mentioned earlier, with Mass Effect Andromeda and Battlefront 2, I think there has just been a perfect storm of bad things happen over this year for BioWare and EA as far as some of these games. And I think that even if it's just perception, and it's not just all perception, but just the perception that EA needs to come out with a hit. And I think Anthem, they need to make it a hit. And so if it takes longer, they need to do it and not rush it.
Yeah, And they've done some really kind of unusual stuff. JT, I 100% agree with what JT said about BioWare has a habit of borrowing people from various studios and having them help out. But this is the first time Mark Darrow has been pulled off of Dragon Age to be the executive producer
That's
of
true.
Anthem
Yep.
and Dragon Age. And Andromeda had issues with the executive producer directors. Like, there's been lots of games that have come out that he's not been brought in. So he's one of many. I mean, they pulled Drew back in after all this time, and say, hey, and he got brought up after David Gator left Anthem. So those to me were a couple of unusual moves. And all that happened after exactly what JT is saying. Andromeda going under, and then Battlefront, the huge public, pushback, and they're feeling the financial effects from it now. And there's been a lot of articles, even on the, on the stock market side, even from CNBC has had several articles about all this, which I've not ever seen them actually get into the games industry to this level before. It really is kind of unusual. It's been interesting to watch, but unusual. But the one thing I would really like, and maybe for us to think about a little bit, is so I was reading, again, we're talking about the author of the Kotaku article, Jason Schreier. He wrote a book. It came out earlier this year, at the end of 2016 or the beginning of 2019, something like that, or 2017. And he talked in there, he interviewed a bunch of BioWare folks and talked about how Dragon Age 2 was made, why it was made, because it wasn't supposed to actually exist. And the reason that it was because SWTOR was delayed to 2011, and it wasn't supposed to be, so they had to have a game to stick in there. And if they did that again with this one, with Anthem, and it being, theoretically, it kind of sounds like maybe it got pushed back, or it obviously has been pushed back right now. But I'm sure this isn't the first time it's been pushed back. That I really feel like Andromeda was supposed to be that filler game in between that was supposed to be there to keep everybody's attention, and then Battlefront would take over, right? And those two fell through. And I just wonder if there was any discussion whether or not it was when before Andromeda came out, if there was discussion about ending SWTOR, if it was then, and then once those two games really have been disappointing, we're still here, which is why we're up in the air. This is just complete supposition and theorizing, but
so you're saying like they were hoping that probably that Andromeda was going to be a filler, then Battlefront 2 would be the other filler, and that because those games would take off, that Star Wars: The Old Republic could be phased out. Is that where you're? Yeah. And so now Star Wars: The Old Republic has had to be that filler.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely find that interesting because EA and their network of studios, it's not like they're just releasing these two games. There's lots of other games they're releasing, so
right.
It's definitely interesting that they're putting so much stock into those two in particular.
Yeah, but that's true too with that time frame of when Dragon Age 2 came out. They weren't planning on making that game. The original plan was to go from Dragon Age Origins to Dragon Age Inquisition. And because SWTOR was behind, EA came to BioWare and said, you have to make a game to fill the gap that's been vacated by delaying SWTOR. So EA is really kind of like methodical in how they do things. JT's already alluded to that. I don't know about others, but I am really kind of untrusting of EA/BioWare right now.
And she's putting that mildly right now.
Yes, I'm putting it very mildly. And for the last year, I've been asking, and JT knows this for a fact because I asked it on a Krellian Run stream with Eric. Hey, is Anthem going to interfere with SWTOR at all? That was asked to Eric directly, and it was no. And I'm like, So it's very interesting to think about, I guess.
Well, it's kind of like, I guess they have their small little team, and it's not going to interfere with their small little team, maybe.
Right.
So that kind of brings up two more questions, though. Question one is, if things continue to go the way that they are, if Anthem fails, could that be the end of BioWare, as some industry insiders have predicted? And then question two for you guys is, do you think in the future SWTOR will get more devs?
All right, Alise, you want to go first?
Oh man, I was about ready to throw you under the bus. Okay, so question number one was, do I think if Anthem tanks that BioWare's gone?
Yep.
If you would have asked me before Visceral was closed, I would have said no. But honestly, I am 50% yes and 50% no, and I'm feeling generous today. I was gut checked when they closed the studios. Not that they shelved Andromeda. I was, with the speed of what they did it with, and I'm still mad about it. But that wasn't as surprising as them closing BioWare Montreal. And then especially with them having Anthem in development, right? So 3 studios, now we're down to 2, and you've got one MMO going that you have to make content for. Dragon Age 4 being developed. We've known they've been working on that for at least a year and a half now. The devs have talked about it. And Mark Dara has released sneak peeks on his Twitter, like, hinting game stuff. And then, the stuff at Visceral. And then Anthem. But then them closing Visceral 2 and putting a Star Wars game on ice, as well as Mass Effect, 2 big IPs that EA has that's not a sports game and a shooter. It was mind-boggling that they would not just cancel the project, but they close both studios.
Mm-hmm.
So that is concerning quite a bit. And how much they expect the game to have to be good. It's not good enough to be average. It has to be good also is another concern. And then question number 2 was it, if it goes under, what happens with SWTOR?
Well, question number 2 is basically, as they switch games, so, Anthem gets done, the next Dragon Age gets done. Do you think they would ever give SWTOR more developers?
No. I asked again at the same time, if SWTOR was made today, would it be released in the condition that it's in? Like, would it be released with this design, the choice of, being a classic MMO and stuff, as opposed to kind of what you're seeing nowadays when MMOs are coming on the market? They're not that classic version, like WoW and SWTOR and, Ultima Online or EverQuest or whatever it is. And I was told absolutely not. So I really feel like SWTOR is kind of going along because it's making money. And at some point, if they need the resources, I just feel like they're going to pull them, then feed it. They had that chance 2005, 2006,
mm-hmm.
and they didn't. So, and that's when it was making money hands over fist, and it was being mentioned in the annual reports. They didn't then.
Any follow-up on that, JT?
All right, so my 2 questions there. If Anthem fails, I'm going to have to say I'm probably wait, I can't believe this. I got a higher percentage of saying that that BioWare would actually close than Elise. I would definitely, but the thing I would caveat that with, I think they would gut BioWare. Like they're going to take the any of the games that they're working on, like the Dragon Age and anything like that. EA is going to keep that. They will gut it. They will keep the talent that they want to keep, and the rest they will dissolve and they will sell it off, get rid of it, whatever. If Anthem is a complete utter failure, and like Elise said, it's not just Anthem has to be a good game. It's got to be on the caliber of like game of the year is what EA is wanting basically, and what almost they need right now to give them that kind of that little trophy like thing that says, please come back, because it gets the perception with all the pushback that's been going in EA's direction from the community and stuff. They need a win, and they need a big win. So,
yeah, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head here. Last year for 2017, like even the list that we made, Alise, did EA have any Game of the Year candidates last year?
No.
Nope.
Yeah.
The last successful game. Well, I'm sorry. For BioWare, BioWare's last successful game was Dragon Age Inquisition was Game of the Year in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And they were in the exact same position, again, according to the book Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, that lots of BioWare developers were named and interviewed for that chapter. But basically they were saying a lot of the same things that you're hearing now about Anthem. They felt like they had to, because of Dragon Age 2 being
right. Yeah,
so,
they put a lot into Inquisition the same way. They put a lot of resources from other studios to make sure Inquisition was up there as Game of the Year quality.
Yeah. Sadly, though, the stakes are higher this time.
Yes.
Because Dragon Age Inquisition is a good game, but then it was followed by Witcher 2. Now you have Anthem that's coming in, and Destiny 1 after 3 years was actually a very good game.
Mm-hmm.
And The Division this year is getting
got
really
Ambush?
Good reviews this year as finally finding its footing.
Yeah,
what is that?
Go ahead.
Ambush is the new expansion they're working on, I guess.
1.8 or something is the one that just came out that everybody's raving about. That finally Division is like a good game now, is what you see. And all these content creators that left, they're coming back and going, wow, it's actually pretty fun. That's what Anthem's coming into.
Which may be another reason they're taking a little more time.
Right. And the other thing that really concerns me too is that BioWare just is not a MMO really company. That's not their thing. So unlike Bungie, that has Blizzard Activision as a publisher, Blizzard knows how long it takes for an MMO to really find its footing, and is willing to, clearly gave Destiny time, the Bungie folks time to try. I don't feel that EA has the patience that Blizzard Activision does as a publisher.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, and as we've seen with other games of this type, they're not going to get it all right to come out. Even if it's good, when people first start playing it, it's going to take them time to figure out what they're doing. And my concern is EA is not going to give them that time.
Right. Well, actually, I have a follow-up kind of question. Because I think I can agree with Elise. I do not think that they'll get any more developers to Star Wars: Old Republic. I think the only thing that would happen is if there would actually be a brand new Star Wars: Old Republic or new Star Wars MMO, and they would go to the Bioware studio. That's the only way they develop a whole new MMO. But what happens if Anthem fails? Will Disney take over the Star Wars licensing stuff, which might directly affect Star Wars: Old Republic and stuff?
I don't see that happening, not yet. I think EA would have to screw up again really, really bad for Disney to revoke that.
I mean, it's a contract, right?
Right. It is just a contract. I was just meaning because if Anthem fails and say they dissolve BioWare, are I mean, you're talking, okay, there you've now lost Star Wars: The Old Republic, so the only thing you'd have left is Battlefront 2.
Well, and also that Respawn, EA got to buy
Yeah.
Respawn because they had it in their contract that if some other company tried to take a studio and that was developing a Star Wars game, that they got first try to try and buy the property. So that's how they ended up paying all that money for Respawn. So you have that game. But I just wonder whether or not how much really SWTOR figures into Disney's overall business plan. It's not canon anymore, right? It's extended universe. And yes, it looks like they're pulling pieces of that in there, but they can just as easily say, nope, I don't care. And then nobody did anything about them closing Visceral and the game they were working on there. Supposedly it's going to EA worldwide, right? But there's no timeline on that, how long they're going to work on it, or even if they're working on it. And the worst part about all that is that the developers who were working on, what is it, Star 1313, went to Visceral.
Yeah.
Those people were there working on, I'm sure they had pulled in some of those people that were at Visceral working on that Star Wars game, and they didn't care about that. That got closed. You didn't hear any Disney squawking from that, at least not in the public. So,
Well, I would definitely say, when light of stuff from the pushback from the loot crates and everything like that, I would definitely say Disney has been in EA's ear about, hey, what's going on? What are you doing with the license and stuff?
yeah, but I think that's just because they got caught.
Yeah. From what I understand, Disney actually has, it's either weekly or monthly meetings with EA about the Star Wars license. That was something that came up with the whole loot box thing.
Yes, but you know one of the reasons why EA had to have gotten that is because of how much money they make in loot boxes with, I mean, they had to have. Andrew Wilson had to have come out and been like, hey, this is what we do with FIFA. I could do this for Star Wars.
Yep.
I mean, they had to have in their, bid for that contract.
Well,
So
I know I'm going to be devil's advocate here, but if loot crates are done right, they're fine. I mean, look at Overwatch. If they're done right and customization, they're fine. They're absolutely fine. I think the problem with it, and it was interesting, I watched one of Kid Lee was doing Star Wars Battlefront 2. He personally bought Starship one?
Yeah.
And you got stuff for the ground game. What? I mean, they couldn't even get the categories right on what was dropping out of their crates. That's complete frustrating to anybody. Even if you're not spending real money, you're just spending like your in-game time, and you absolutely get nothing a part of the gameplay that you want.
I don't have a problem with loot crates. I buy stuff on the cartel market for Star Wars: The Old Republic that's cosmetic. Right. I bought with my in-game currency for Overwatch. I bought the Halloween Witch Mercy skin because I wanted it, because I didn't get it last year or this year. So I don't have a problem with that. But EA has overplayed their hand with their implementation of said loot crates.
Right.
Basically trying to go for the same system that they used in their FIFA and stuff games. That kind of like, baseball card pack kind of random stuff, right? Pokemon packs. I mean, that's essentially what they're doing. I mean, it's cool in packs, but when you get into the game sphere, it's not the same. You just can't say, oh, this is a direct, you can implement this exactly the same way. And even I think in sports games, that kind of works. You do fantasy football and you draft people, and you're essentially kind of gambling when you go to draft day. You aren't guaranteed to get this player or that player when you're competing with your friends. It's, kind of the way the thing goes and where you get in the lottery of how you pick and who picks what and all that stuff. That makes sense. But then trying to take that kind of acceptance of the community and then artificially putting it into a game like Star Wars or into a game like Battlefront doesn't really mesh very well. But it makes money.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just I'm so I understand that Disney probably wasn't aware of all the bits and pieces, but they had to have looked at how much money EA has made from those properties and them saying, we're the best to take over this license, and made a choice to go with EA. So they couldn't have been the only ones bidding.
Well, we'll go ahead and switch topics here real quick. There's two more little things I want to handle in this video, and one we just talked about, which was actually the closing of the Amy Hennig Visceral game. So it's been basically confirmed that assets of that game are going to be put into a new Star Wars game that is going to be semi-open world. It could even be a Star Wars Destiny clone of its own. So if Anthem doesn't shut down SWTOR, do we think this other, sort of quote-unquote other Star Wars open world game will?
Oh, if you have a good implementation, and I'll just use the Division as for, if you could have like a mod of the Division where you could implement blaster rifles and Jedi or whatever, and you can move it to fast-paced action, similar like you do Battlefront 2, and it's based on loot, yeah, I think there would be a ton of people that would end up going to that type of game because that's what we saw in the movies. That's what we read in the books about Star Wars moving fast. I love Star Wars: Old Republic, but because it's the typical MMO where it is you're using your abilities and stuff like that, they're on cooldowns and everything like that. I think it's a totally different gaming experience than what a fast-paced action type of loot system game that they're talking about.
Yeah, and actually we have a little bit of modern day evidence that actually would support that. ESO right now is doing really well, and it kind of is in between what SWTOR is and say something like the Division, not obviously aesthetically, but ESO is essentially a looter, even though it wasn't put that way, but it is more of an action-based combat system. And it's kicking everybody's butts right now with users. I mean, 2.5 million users a day is the statistics that was quoted by the game director. So, I mean, we can see that. As if, now to the question of whether or not, if, say, Anthem does well, right, and if they were to get this new Star Wars IP up, the EA studio, right, is what you're asking, would that have any bearing on SWTOR?
Yeah, because back
right?
in the day we had Galaxies, and Galaxies had to be shut down before SWTOR launched, so they couldn't have two MMO style games running at the same time. So, do we think that it would shut down SWTOR to activate the other one?
I think that EA does not really understand MMOs. They didn't understand it back when Ultima Online went up, and they still don't really get it. I would be shocked if they had more than one MMO running at the same time. Now, we don't know for sure that it is going to be straight up an MMO because Casey Hudson for Bioware is trying to thread the needle for Dragon Age 4 and say, well, when we say live service, we don't mean like multiplayer, we mean live updates and DLC, which I have my own opinion about what that means, but they might try and split that hair and say, well, this isn't really an MMO. This is just a single player game with social space. I mean, they could do that. But honestly, I just don't think the EA really likes MMOs that much. I'm going to be honest with you. And I don't think they're going to suffer more than one at a time, personally.
Yep, I agree.
Probably the only thing maybe is if you could have Star Wars: The Old Republic still semi-maintenance mode, because if it's still making money, I can see EA keeping it around, especially if it was first launching this new game of that style, just as, well, we're going to cover our bases for the first bit as far as revenue, and we'll have a little bit of extra revenue come in on a game that we are not really having to spend any more money in right now.
I don't think they'd ever turn it off. They haven't done it. You can still play
Right.
Ultima Online. Was it a year ago? Origin put out a, hey, we still have Ultima Online. Give it a try. It's in the Origin marketplace. I mean, like it was a year ago or 2 years ago or something they did that. I mean, they never really die. Every weekend people get on and play Mass Effect 3 multiplayer. They're still buying the loot crates, the packs still. So they're not going to turn it off. But the question is, are they going to be actively, that's the question that needs to be asked. Are they going to actively be putting resources and development resources to it? That's the question, really. But I don't.
And they'll never stop with the cartel market.
Right.
Correct. And people still play it. Lord of the Rings Online. I mean, that went into maintenance mode when? 2014 or something? When Turbine got sold? And then they put out a raid like a year and a half ago or something for the thing after basically doing patching and stuff in between. Like it wasn't really an full-on active development.
Well, I thought they were still doing some content for that. I know Ravenel used to be on Curling on Radio with me and Mox. They were just got done doing one of the newer raids, and that was just a few weeks
But there
ago.
wasn't anything for forever. And do you remember Rav said, I never would have guessed that Lord of the Rings Online got a raid before SWTOR got a raid.
Well, we'll go ahead and start wrapping this up with the sort of final topic, and that is, where do you think SWTOR is going to go for 2018? I mean, we know a little bit because here just a day or two ago, Keith did confirm 6.0. There is an expansion coming, but sort of up until that point and then beyond that point, what do you guys think?
So up to 6.0 and beyond, what do we think?
Yeah.
I definitely think also in that post, he did mention something about some events they have for the summer. So I definitely think we will probably have something going on again this summer, whether it revolves around dark versus light, maybe, I don't know. If they do bring that, they need to do some more stuff, some new stuff. I think we're definitely obviously going to get the expansion. I am going to go out on a limb and I say that it is going to be more of the traditional expansion as opposed to how they've done the last expansion where they had at least one boss, then another boss after what was a month and a half in between those bosses.
Yeah. Didn't they confirm that they're not doing chapters?
I think so. Well, it was said that the chapters didn't go over as well. I think Charles said something like that. Now, whether that means they're going to chuck that whole system, I don't know. But, that would be interesting if they just decide to do like one chunk of story with the next one. Similar might be Shadow of Revan or something like that. I don't know. So I would say we're going to get more of a traditional expansion, probably raise level cap about 5 levels, 1 op, and maybe a war zone and some sort of story content.
How about you, Alise?
Okay, so the question is, what do I think is going to happen for 2018 first? Yep. Was the first part, right? I think we're going to get pretty much what we've gotten up until this point, just some more. They are busy with Anthem, and I think that is where everybody's attention is. And so whatever we get, I think, was done before Anthem really started ramping up and they started pulling people. So I don't expect any major stuff other than events, live stuff, more quality of life improvements, because I think that's the kind of stuff they can do with the staff and what they're allowed to do without asking for permission from EA. As for the expansion, I don't know. I mean, my first gut reaction is to say story and not group content because there's more people who play story, right, than group content. But I don't know. I'm kind of pessimistic. I'm gonna let JT be the cheerleader and say I really think it's gonna be more story content than group content. But and then after that, I am bullish about how much more time the game has. So
How much time do you think, honestly, if you had to put a time frame right now?
I think that if they're going to pull the plug, they're going to do it 2019, 2020. I think that we have something to worry about whether Anthem does well or not.
Right.
Because I just don't think BioWare knows how to run 2 MMOs at the same time.
Well, I've said for a long time, I think a good development cycle, and where I mean you got constantly growing and stuff, I think 2 to 3 years. And I said that like well before this article. So.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I've been saying, I've been yelling about Anthem causing problems for a year now. So that ain't this article, like I said, just kind of confirmed what I kind of felt in my gut watching stuff. But I mean, they develop for 10-year cycles is what I understand from what I've read for these type of games. And we're at year 6, but really with the beta, it's 7.
Right.
So, and from what I understand, the Hero engine is a pain in the butt to develop for, even though Frostbite's bad, but Hero's worse. So isn't that the engine they use for SWTOR?
Yeah, I believe so.
So, and that thing's like been duct taped together pretty much over time.
Yeah, they actually got a beta version, and they basically, it's not even the Hero engine anymore. They made it what they want it to be.
Frankenstein engine.
That's some good duct tape.
I mean, you just got to wonder when you're competing with all these other things for pretty much like the same pot of people. And then you bring on Battlefront 2, and then you bring on, Anthem, which is a shooter, and the Division is good. And there's a lot of nibbling. And then you've got ESO and, all these other new ones. Crowdfall's coming, Ashes Creation's coming. I mean, there's a lot of people nibbling around the edges. You got to wonder at what point it's time that you're spending more to try and get less. And I don't know what that point is, but I don't know.
Yep. So I'll just go to sort of say to wrap this up is I think SWTOR is safe for 2018, but beyond that, I am concerned. And pretty much like what you said, BioWare running 2 MMOs at the same time is going to be a problem. If SWTOR manages to make it another couple of years and we end up getting this next Star Wars game, which as far as we know is going to be MMO-like, them potentially running EA as a company running 3 or more is just going to cause even more problems. So I think overall for SWTOR for 2018, it's going to be very similar to last year as far as the amount of content. Maybe even a little bit less, but I think just very similar overall.
I'd agree.
But I think, ladies and gentlemen, that'll go ahead and do it for this first episode. It turned out pretty good. Thanks, JT and Alise, for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Yeah. And before we go, JT, what's going on with PCP these days?
Passionately Casual Podcast, not the drug.
Oh, man, you took my line.
I knew you were going to do that. Actually, we are getting ready to have an interview with one of the people over there at Non-Toxic Gaming. We're doing that. That's going to be on the next show, which will be February the 7th. That's going to be the next show there. And it's really exciting. I like the relaunch that we've done with Passionately Casual now that we've merged Corellian Radio in with that, and actually brought you along as doing one of the segments in there. So I think that it's awesome. A lot of good things going on with the podcast.
And for those who want to check out that podcast, where can they reach that at?
When we go live on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern time, and that'll be twice a month is what we're shooting for. So definitely head on over. You go to twitch.tv/NTCG Facebook.com/passionately casual. You can check on there, click a follow, turn on notifications. And then also at passionately, let me see if I get this right, passionately dot casual. Nah, I've totally messed it up. Let me look at it real quick.
Oh, wow. JT pulled a me.
I totally found.
And we'll have links to these down below the video as well. Doing those website upgrades.
Actually, it is passionatelycasual.com. There's no dot. That's our email.
All right, cool. And Alise, what are you smart people doing at the console?
Well, you know how we like to talk about up and coming items, topics of conversation in the community of SWTOR. So perhaps Monday's show will be familiar after you listen to this one. So more than that, I really can't say. We like for it to be a little bit of a surprise, but usually you want to look at the poll, and what we talk about on the poll is an idea of what we're talking about. So we had to change the poll. So tune in.
What is the poll question? I'm curious now.
Well, you asked me before I got up.
Yeah, I've got a shout-out card for Alise. I'll have to make one up for JT now.
Thank you, God. You still have that, because I was like, I don't want to like regurgitate all that.
But the Council SWTOR is on Twitch every Monday night at what time?
9 p.m. Eastern.
And then they can also catch the if they can't see the live show, then they can catch it up on YouTube as well, correct?
And iTunes, and I think whatever Android podcast service you prefer to use.
All right, cool. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and do it for the show. Thank you all so much for watching. Of course, if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. And we'll see you guys next time. So thanks for watching.